workshop with Annie Storr. I'm Sarah Claflin, the Education and Communications Manager. I'll be the moderator for this talk today. I just wanted to let you guys know that it is being recorded so that we can share it with other people who perhaps cannot join us this afternoon. And it'll be there for you for reference later. I'll post that and I'll send you all an email with the link on our YouTube channel when Zoom has formatted it for me. The following will be the format for this talk. I'll give a brief introduction, then I'll hand it over to Annie and she'll walk us through her exercises for the quiet eye. And so that's how I'm going to start. I'm just going to begin. Dr. Annie Storr, resident scholar of the Women's Studies Research Center at Brandeis University. I believe this is our third year together. Her doing the talk. Normally we're in person, and of course now we're all virtual, so it's a little bit different. And there are some learning curves, but Annie has been teaching me and been guiding.
And vice versa.
It's been interesting and wonderful as always. Annie teaches both art history and education, having devoted her career to exploring the intersection of these two disciplines. Today, she will lead experiencing exercises through the museum's current exhibitions. She's going to concentrate today a lot on impact, which includes 3 artists, Victoria Elbroch, Shaina Gates, and Mary O'Malley. Impact presents works by the artist Victoria Elbroch, who was the 2019 award recipient of the Piscataqua Regional Artist Advancement Grant from 2019. And Shaina and Mary are the finalists of this prestigious grant award. Annie has developed exercises for the quiet eye, or EQE, to encourage patient reflection, appreciation, and an attempt to avoid the rush to understand or determine a set interpretation for what we see. Her research areas are interdisciplinary art history, social history, museum studies, histories of art education, audience studies, and learning assessments. And today, Annie is going to give us an overview of basics, and she's also going to introduce new exercises for anybody who has joined us last week. And then towards the end, she's going to give us also some images from our other exhibition, Enrico Riley, The Blues and Me, Witnessing Love. So we'll get a nice combination today. So without further ado, Annie, I'll hand it over to you.
All right. If we don't get to the Enrico Riley slides, which I have set up ready to roll, we will integrate them and combine them into the recorded copy. So they'll be, just like NPR, where they say there's more on the CD than you saw on the screen. We may do something like that. So, all right. It's really lovely to be back. This is now my longest running collaboration with an institution, either campus or museum, and it's really wonderful. Sarah and I are learning a lot by what happens between us as we're setting these up. Now, I'm going to talk a little less about the philosophy and history of exercises for the quiet eye than I did the last time, partly because some of you have seen both, and partly because the work we're dealing with today in impact invites such minute, slow, quiet looking that I want to give a little more time with each step than I usually do, and still not grab more time than you promised me at the other end. So in some ways, doing exercises for the quiet eye virtually is an effort to replicate some of the experiences you might have in a gallery, if we all could be there together. And in some other ways, it's doing things that we've discovered are possible in the virtual format, trying to cut loose from replicating in a course not quite the same way, the experience of being in the gallery. So I'll be doing a few things that are different than being there and a few things that are like being there. With that said, the first thing I'd like to do is imagine that you all had gathered in the gallery waiting for this program to begin, and does what any person interested in art does. They begin to wander through the exhibition on their own first. And so I'm going to go through, I will not say run through the slides, I will say walk through the slides, so that we'll look at the works approximately in the order in which they're exhibited in the exhibition, so that you can imagine yourself wandering a little. You will notice that I'm not just clicking through the slides so that you can enumerate them. I'm trying to give each one a little bit of time for your personal looking. In my setup of this session, however, I think it's still not going to feel like enough time. So you can go see this exhibition in person right through November up till Thanksgiving, but you also can find it in a different format online through the gallery's website. So do promise yourself the time to go back and look at a longer stretch. EQE it centers on the idea that when we are here, the method is viewer-centered. So there may be novices to art history in the group, or to novices to art and art history in the group. There may be newcomers to slow looking. There may be scholars. There may be academic colleagues who are thinking about how to apply this. There may be artists, or the artists, one of the artists themselves. And in this case, for now, for this hour, we're all viewers. So we're all equivalent in having a direct, personal I thou. The humanity in me recognizes the humanity in you, experience between yourselves as individuals and the work of art. So with that quick preamble, let me simply walk fairly slowly through the exhibit. Ooh. My screen is locked. There we go. All right. And moving on. And again. Oh. And moving on. And next. Thank you, Mother. And again. And another. It's so seldom that we get a chance to see a large body of work like this. And moving. And again. And again. Now, at this point going through the gallery, I imagine it's likely that your eyes and your mind would be very full. And before we go on, I want to encourage you to just close your eyes briefly for a second or two. Just close your eyes and kind of squinch them up and let them go. And then we'll continue going through the exhibition. Next, we're going to have change. And moving. And again. And again, some change. And another. And again. And again. And one more. Now, while we prepare to move on and do some exercises, some kind of focused activities, I encourage everyone to take a minute and close your eyes, shake your head a little bit, shake your arms, just clear and refresh a tiny bit. And then we'll be going on to look at probably 4 sets, possibly 3 sets of works from which you can choose an example. And I'll talk you through an activity. Now, the basic ground rules of exercises for the quiet eye, and this is hard to replicate in the virtual format, is that each person looking chooses the work that they are going to explore, take time with. And so in each case, I'm showing you 2 slides, but they are not an invitation, as in an art history class, to compare and contrast. It's simply, I can't show you the whole gallery and invite you to roam it, so I'm giving you a couple of choices. I had a suggestion from one of the people who were with us last week, which is that once you've made your choice, you may want to cover the side of your screen that has the other work on it so that you can really concentrate. I tried it and it seems like a good idea. I also encourage you to have a pencil and a piece of paper, or as a second best, your cell phone so that you can write a few words. The first exercise we're going to do, we did last week, but I'm going to add another step to it, and we will spend less time reflecting on it as a group in order to move into new things. So with that, for this pair, I'm going to ask you first to take a browse of them both and choose which for now you would like to use for this exercise. And then the task I would like you to do is to, in just a moment, to start generating a list of words, preferably a list of adjectives. Now, don't sweat the small stuff. If some nouns and verbs turn up, that's just fine. Also, if what you write is a very short descriptive phrase, that's just fine. And I think you will see that descriptive words, adjectives, will be the most helpful in your understanding how you're reacting to the work that you're seeing. So what I'd like you to do is to take your choice. I'm going to be quiet and then guide you slightly later, and generate this string of words. I recommend the shape of a column. And if the words just flow and flow, let that happen. If you have to turn over a page or grab another envelope out of the recycling, that's fine. But I am going to ask you to try to push through to get at least 10 adjectives. And in a couple of moments, I will add a couple of steps to this exercise, give you some prompts. And if you don't mind, anyone who wants to can maintain their anonymity. But if I can see you on the screen, if you open up your video, I'll be able to tell whether you're looking like you're done or whether you're still working on it. So I encourage that, but don't require it. All right, so generate a list of words. We'll take another minute or two. And if anybody wants, just send us a chat note or unmute yourself for a second and just say, time please, and we'll take more time. It's always a trade-off between doing more exercises and not rushing. If you're stumped at about 6 words, please push through to 10. Just let yourself continue if they are still coming. And whenever you feel like you're done for this time, this round, I encourage you to close your eyes for a moment and just refresh your eyes. All right. Now, last week when we did this exercise, I asked you to do 2 more things with the list, and I'm going to repeat those so that we can get to 1 more this time. And the first thing I'd like you to do is to read down your list of words slowly and circle the 3 that seem to represent your experience the best, or to say the most about the work. Perhaps the things you'd be first to tell somebody if they were as interested as you are. So 3 words. And then here's 1 more classic step. I'd like you to read down your list yet another time and try to remember how you felt as you were writing it. What was going through your mind? And I'd like you to read down the list. And if there was a point at which you stalled out or felt repetitive or only continued because I told you to, or that your words start getting far-fetched, I'd like you to put a line between the words at that point in the list. It's entirely possible the line will be at the very top or the very bottom, but usually it's in the middle. And when you've done that, I'm going to ask you to do 1 more thing. For those of you who are operating at a different speed than I am, one of the glories of doing this is that you can just take a while to look at the other one you didn't look at so carefully. Here's the additional step I'd like you to take with your list. And think of your list as a living journal in real time of the responses that you had to the work as you were looking, because that's what it is. It's a sequence record, it's a log. And I would like you to look at the list, and next to any word that is definitely about the work, a simple example for either of these would be square or rectangle, but it could also be something much more subtle. It's something that is clearly descriptive of the object, of the work. I would like you to put the letter I next to it for it. And for any words that are actually a description of how you reacted, or are a reference to how you reacted. I'd like you to put the letter M for me. And an example would be frustrated or frustrating. You wouldn't get to that word if you weren't commenting upon your reaction. And I'm going to ask you to put either I or T next to each word. No I/T's. You have to decide whether it's more about the work or more about your reaction to it. All right. Classically, in the gallery, I could be looking around the group and see that there were a couple of people who were kind of bouncing a little and feeling eager, and a couple of others, a few others who were kind of leaning back. And from that, I could decide what to do with regard to the next basic ground rule of exercises for the quiet eye, which is that nobody ever has to share if they don't want to. But these exercises are for you and have to do with your direct relationship with the art, not having the intervention of somebody else who wants an answer. That said, if there is anybody here who would like to read their list, we all learn from hearing that. So I can say, if you would like to, just unmute yourself, and I will see the yellow box. And if not, I'll say a few words about this exercise. And then go along. Is there anyone who'd like to read the list?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and read mine, but can you hear me?
Thank you, Maria. Sure. Thank you.
I chose the work on the right. My right, so the trees that were more literal trees. I wrote dark, wooded, lined road, complex, rural, alone, surrounded, lit, developing. Last one is
We're having a bit of a sound problem.
now.
Carry on. You're going to be reading your list a couple of times, so we'll get the gist.
Okay, sorry. Do you want me to start over? Or?
Why don't you? Thank you.
Okay, sorry about that. Dark, wooded, tree-lined road, complex, mysterious, rural, alone, secluded, surrounded, moonlit, enveloping, and looming.
Thank you. And may I ask what your 3 words were?
Dark, mysterious, alone.
Thank you. Now, where on the list in general are those 3 words? Are they near the top, near the bottom, or in the middle?
Dark is my top word, and mysterious and alone are in the middle.
Or in the middle. Thank you so much, Maria. To shorten what we would normally go into a bit more in depth, because you're looking at a journal of your responses to the work, and you can also see where in the time you were looking that your most important responses happened. Many of us who love art have some developed habits of looking And you will generally, each person will apply the way they're used to looking at the top. And those are usually pretty good ways of doing things. And so often, one or two of the major responses are at the top. But when some of the other important responses are in the middle or even all the way at the bottom, what that means is you had to go through all of those other responses to get there, and that your mind is working the whole time. So that this is, in shorthand, an argument for taking your time, slowing down, and also in some way, in your mind or on a piece of note paper, making a record of how you responded so that you can track the relationship that you're building with the work of art. Now we have so much to do and so little time, so I'm going to go right on to another exercise, but I thank you very much, Maria. Oh, my screen is locking. Oh, there we go. So just take a quick flasher. And we're going to do a short version of an exercise we did last week in order to go do something completely different after that. And in this case, again, I'd like to invite you to choose which one you're going to look at. And if it's helpful, cover half your screen or just discipline your eye. And what I'd like you to do is give yourself a leisurely, unrushed look at this work of art. I'm going to ask you to be paying attention to what your eye is doing. So when your eye lands on the work of art, where does it start? Where does it seat itself and then start moving? Pay attention to the path that your eye takes. If your eye pauses, pause long enough to ask yourself why you think that happened. And then like a Ouija board, it may just keep on going. You follow it, mindful of what's going on in your reaction to the work until your eye comes to rest. And again, ask yourself why that happened. I always have to ask this proviso now. I learned it from doing these exercises. Should your eye go around in circles 3 times, for the purposes of this exercise, you're done. I do not expect you to follow the path of your eye infinitely to 100 circles. So give yourself some time to look. We'll do it a little more quickly than last week, but let your eye travel. And when your eye comes to rest, just close your eyes again, refresh them a little bit. You might even want to pay attention to what you see in your mind's eye, and then open them. Now, if you're interested in what's going on, I talked a little more about it last week, and that is in the video that Sarah has posted from the Enrico Riley exhibition, and it's the second exercise. But I do want to encourage you to do this exercise almost every time that you encounter new works of art. Whereas the adjective exercise, the way we did it, asks you actually to begin to distinguish and pay attention to what part of the exchange between you and the work of art is about you and what part of it is about the work of art. This one helps you understand how you are relating to the work of art, what you're doing, how you're seeing it, how you're looking, and how your mind is guiding that. And gradually recognizing what the artist has done, which is to some extent, but not entirely, directing your journey. So these are both exercises for learning to pay attention to the dynamic between the artist and between the work of art and the viewer. Again, let's take a quick breather, and then we'll do a really quite different one. And possibly we'll have time for a fast warm-up, a fast wind down. All right. Now, here's what I would like to ask you to do with, again, you're going to be choosing which of these two works of art you would like to work from. You will have noticed by now, because you might be trying to take notes of which is which and what's what, that in order to make sure that you're attending to the looking, we have removed the titles and the artists' names. And those you can get at by going online to the virtual version of the exhibition and connecting up what you've looked at with those. Because my goal is really to emphasize the relationship between the viewer and the art without your using a good deal of your brain power trying to imagine an artist and what might have been in their mind, but to focus on what's in your mind. So here's the exercise, and it will take us probably 3 minutes over time. I would like you to choose whichever work you'd like to look at. And then, promising that you do not have to read them out loud, I would like you to write 2 poetic couplets. And a poetic couplet is 2 lines of poetry. The most famous rhyming one is roses are red, violets are blue, sugar is sweet, and so are you. That's 1 line and then another line. And the couplet can be part of a longer poem, and you can go on someday if you want to with these. But just 2 lines is all we're asking now. But I want you to write 2 lines twice. And I'll repeat this in a minute or 2. I'd like you to write 1 couplet where the words seem, the end words, the last word, seem harmonic, consonant, like they belong together. Moon and June, okay? And they rhyme. And the other couplet, I want the words not to rhyme, and for the last word to be as different, contrasting, dissonant, opposite from the other as it possibly can be. Now, that's a lot to do in just a few minutes. Think poetically, and if you simply jot down the last word for the rhyming couplet and the last words for the non-rhyming couplet, that's fine. But I will be quiet so you can focus on this, and there will be one more step. We'll give it another minute or so. Remember, the objective is not to write poetry. It's to explore your experience. I will say I've done this with my graduate students where I've asked them to write 5 couplets, each with a different set of rules. And however many you do, here's the last step. I'd like you to look at your work of art of choice, give it a fresh look, away from your industrious writing. And then I'd like you to read both couplets. And I'd like you to circle the one that is closest to your authentic response to the work. The one with the rhyming, harmonious language, or the one with the non-rhyming, more contrasting language. Thank you, Hillary. Some of you are sending terms into the chat. So here's what I want you to notice about what we just did. And then I will leave it up to you whether you want to do a fast one in additional time or not. It is very common for anybody looking at art, whether they do it all the time or they just sort of like it in a casual way, to move quite quickly, to gather their first impressions. And when they have a sort of satisfactory bunch of first impressions, they move on. When they have something to say with the person there in the gallery, they move on. And as we showed with the adjective exercise, and where Maria's circles were down fairly far down the list, often your strongest reactions come after a sequence of responses. By the same token, if you ask yourself or a group of students to write a poem, they will write from their first impressions. They will get to doing what they're supposed to do. And so what I instead did was forced you into position arbitrarily of writing 2 completely different poetic couplets or bits of them, which represent 2 different reactions that you had to the work. And then ask you to go back and say, which one's the most important? And it's simply a way through an activity of pushing people into second or third or fourth impressions. And then going back and reflecting on what it all amounts to for you. So, would you, it is 4 minutes over time. Would you like a short exercise to wind down, or shall we wind down by simply looking at a couple of works of art? Does anyone have an opinion? You can just unmute yourself and say so. All right. Then with, oh, here, okay, I'm seeing the chats. We'll do one more that is fairly short. And it's one that I love to do because it helps me honor somebody who I admired greatly and helps us remember where we are in global history. The next exercise is named for David Driscoll, who was one of the eminent historians of African American art, an artist, a critic, a memoirist and archivist of the second generation of the Harlem Renaissance artists, a very, very important person in American art and art history, not just African American art history. But turns out he was a student of my dad at Howard University in the 40s. And when I moved to DC, without his telling me why, he took me under wing and became a mentor and a friend. And David Driscoll died on April Fool's Day of COVID. He was the first person that I knew. So from a lecture he gave about 18 months ago, he said, he was in answer to a question, when does he bother to write criticism? He said, I always look to see if there's something I've never seen before. So our short exercise now, and then we can open up the mics if you want, is simply to ask you to look at your choice of either of these. Okay, start it again. Give a good thorough look, as much as you can in a couple of minutes, and look for something that you've never seen before. This one will also serve as our wind down. If we were standing in a group, if you had someone who came to the gallery, think of yourself as showing that person something that you've never seen before and asking them to do likewise. I'm sure you're going to find something that has never failed. Probably 1,000 people in 150 or more groups. And with that, I'm going to say thank you very much for doing exercises for the quiet eye today. Our time is already overpassed, but I'm not going anywhere. And I don't think Sarah has to go anywhere for a few minutes. So we're just going to stay here. And if you would like to chat or ask questions, please feel free. I always forget to do this, and just to show you, there's my email address if anybody wants it. And I put back up the names of the artists who just gave us this wonderfully reflective session: Victoria Elbroch, Shaina Gates, and Mary O'Malley, who, after all, did the work that we got to look at. So thank you, and thank you all. And I will take this down. And if anybody would like to ask a question or make a comment or ask me what the heck was going on or share one of your responses, that would be lovely. I already believe I have a tentative date with Maria to look into these exercises. Your audio is down, I'm afraid. Thank you so much, Hillary, and thank you for your notes into the chat.
Yeah, I actually have a question about scale.
Yes.
I feel like when I'm looking at artwork, one of the really important considerations is the physical relationship between the object and myself.
Absolutely.
So I find that to me, the biggest challenge, of course, with two-dimensional work other than surface, but what would you say to that question of scale in terms of not only looking at work online, but reproductions in general in books and
well, that's,
you know, in slide
there's a precise question and then a huge question. In art history classes, I try to remember. I actually have a little Staples That Was Easy button with a little piece of a ruler taped to it that I put next to my podium, which is to remind me that every time we start a course, I say, remember, everything that you see on the screen lies, among other things, because you don't know how big it is. And to remind me to say, this is about twice as tall as you are, or, you know, or whatever. I really wrestled with it, with a particular set of works, all of which are very sizable. Because if I start saying this one is 5 feet by 3 feet, then it takes people out of what they're actually seeing, and they're trying to register a factoid. If, for instance, there were minute illuminated pages, and then huge works as big as Victoria's, then I would say the two things you're looking at the screen, the one on the left is about 100 times bigger than the one.
Sure. That makes sense to talk about that kind of contrast, but I also think, like, for just with a super symmetrical, very sort of design-oriented nature paintings, I just wonder, I mean, I feel like the scale of those would totally transform their meaning.
It would. It would.
Yeah.
And this is the biggest single thing that's lost when not so many people can go to galleries. And / whether or not it's per force from COVID, more and more people are looking at art on websites.
Yeah. But how big are they? Somebody tell me. Christina, how big are they?
Some of them are 50 by 36 inches.
Okay.
I mean, they're all kind of that range. I presume Christina's there. I presume they were all chosen partly because in scale they would echo each other, answer each other.
Yeah, I just didn't want, after Tuesday's debate, I'm really conscientious about talking over people, so I was
I
waiting.
appreciate it. Thank you.
So, yeah, Hillary, that's a great question. So Mary's pieces are sort of full-size drawing sheets, roughly 33 inches high, sort of 24 inches across, kind of in that range. And then Shaina's drawing, the monochromatic graphite pieces, are, I think, the size, and somebody can correct me, I think it's on sheets of paper called like elephant ears. They're 55 inches high, 40 inches across. So they're quite large. The red watercolor piece that we concluded with is small, and that might be about 14 by 14 unframed.
I didn't realize. Thank you.
Yeah.
I did look. I mean, I looked at all the labels but I couldn't keep them in my head.
Right. And Victoria's pieces really vary. So some of her pieces, the work that we looked at where Maria read her poem, and Vicki, you can correct me on this, I believe is no more than, say, 14, 15 inches high. Where some of the drawings, where it was the singular tree that was really spread out and branching, is quite wide, and that's probably about 40 inches. It's on a sheet of paper that's about 40 inches wide and roughly like 30 inches tall, to give you a sense of the dimensions.
This is about the most, I don't even know what word, this trio of works, as a complete set, is about the most demanding of close attention of an exhibition I've ever done EQE with the possible exception of a couple of times I've done it with, Byzantine ivories, and you literally, have to squint. But that's a different thing. That's not experiential. That's, so that just the amount of what's there and how closely you have to look. This was really exceptional.
Thank you so much.
I'm so glad you're here.
It was a little heart pounding.
I hope you found it.
It was really fabulous.
Oh, good. Now, I once tried to think who the artist is. You would know her. I was once at Kingston Gallery at a big reopening with a multi-artist show and doing EQE. I'd been invited to do it, and two people focused on a very large painting by one of the artists who was present. And I had not met everybody. I was new in the Boston area. And she said from the group, "May I please comment?" And I said, "Are you the artist?" And she said, "Yes." I said, "Then no." And she took it exactly right. I mean, I tapped her on the shoulder and said, "Why?" And then said, "No, I didn't want her to speak because I didn't want you to pay more attention than what she had to say, at what she had to say than your own looking. But, here's the artist and, she's got something to say and that would be great. So come on over." But one of the things I've learned is that if you really want to help individuals develop independent, complex looking skills, you have to take out the two crutches, which are the artist and the art historians. Yeah. And they can go back and be in a dialogue with you.
Exactly. Exactly.
Thank you.
Oh,
Anything else?
thank you so much. Thank you, Hillary, for that kind comment.
Yes.
So Amy, I have a question for you. This is Christina. So
Christina.
picking out the artist and picking out the art historian just made me, when you said that, made me think, should curators be approaching label writing differently, not to impart information, but to encourage closer looking? Often I do that with a question, but more often it's a question about the content. So I don't know if you've thought about that. Or...
Oh, sure. Roger Stein from first SUNY Binghamton and then the University of Virginia, and I did a series of workshops on label writing from the perspective of audiences for several years at the Smithsonian. We thought about it a lot. And I think the bugaboo is that there is no unitary answer to any of these questions. Should curators be signing exhibitions? Should educators be writing the labels? Should artists' statements be on the wall? All of these questions are as if it was right and wrong. And in any given gallery over a roster of exhibitions, I would love to see different approaches, thinking about the labels as part of the content of the work of art, which is the exhibition. So that it may be appropriate in one exhibition to have what would normally be the label text in a binder or on a cell phone. Or it might be that you put the artist's name only, or that you put the title only, and that there's more information somewhere else. Or in a different exhibition, you might have, 2 lines of a sonnet for each work of art. Think about the label text that way, and the fact that we have many other additional ways to share identification and credit and so on. And it doesn't have to just be on that little thing anymore. That if you ask a question, which has been done for children for years, but adults tend to respond to it too. If you ask a question for each work, then you're inviting independent looking. However, you're actually guiding the looking more than if you just gave information about it. So you have to, if you completely flip the trio that is the artists, the gallery, including curators and educators, and the viewer, if you completely flip it and say, what do I want to have happen to people who walk in the door in this exhibition? Then everything changes. You're less likely to have the artist's work in groups by artist. Right? I mean, now that would be completely frustrating. I mean, for people for whom that is a format that really works, then you want to have some exhibitions like that too. A number of galleries, and I didn't invent this, but I certainly jumped at the chance when it could happen. A number of galleries change the labels every couple of weeks.
That's interesting.
Or even have Post-its that you can stick under the labels with responses. So that it started out as beta testing. when that became fashionable about 25 years ago at the Smithsonian. And they would put up an exhibition with one set of labels and then interview or just observe people or hear what the scuttlebutt was among the docents. And then they would put it up with another set of labels and test the reaction. There was one time in New York State where they purposely took down from the New York Historical Society, which is mostly an art museum, they took down the labels that were very informative about the 19th century culture in New York because the Regents exams were coming up. And you might think it was they didn't want to give a unfair advantage to the people who went to the New York Historical Society. But actually it was to liberate the kind of brainiac kids who were achievement oriented. Thinking that they had to read the labels to glean one more factoid before the state exams rather than looking at the art. So I think of the labels as flexible as everything else.
Thank you.
It'd be fun to play with it sometime.
Oh.
Anything else? Thank you all so much for coming. Our next sessions, Sarah, are the 22nd and 29th. Is that what?
Yes. Yep.
It's around. I don't know if you're having the same experience I am, but a number of things that were planned for 2020, once the fall of 2020 began, all of a sudden these things that were on hold got dropped on top of the schedule that was already full. And October is crazy.
Thank you so much, Annie. And I will email everybody the link for our YouTube channel for this recorded session. I'll also email you some of our other programming that's happening next week. We're going to have an artist talk with Mary O'Malley. And then I'll also invite you to Annie's continuing workshops that are at the end of the month. And you can attend all of them and learn something different every time. She's going to use both exhibits throughout the workshops.
You didn't get to Enrico Riley today. But you were also focused.
Yeah,
That's great.
It was great, Annie.
Thank you so much. It's lovely to be here.
Okay. Have a great day, everybody. Thank you.
Bye-bye.